father, went to college, taught school outside of New York City, and came to Maine with, I don't think some of you may or may not know, I'm not sure, the old Treasure Island over in East Boothbay.
Yeah.
Little River. Well, Phyllis Washington and I taught together. We probably didn't say two words to each other the entire time we talked together. We didn't exactly get along. But the last day of school, one year, actually the last year that I taught, she came to the room as we were cleaning up for the end of the year. Peeked her head in the door and said, "Are you doing anything for the summer?" And I didn't have any plans, but she said, "I have this place in Maine. My husband's busy with some business stuff. I really need a hand opening up Treasure Island." It was a bed and breakfast at that time. And if you're not doing anything, I really appreciate your help. I said, to this day, I don't know why I said I would do it but as it turned out, when I came to Maine, came around that little bend at Little River and looked out to White Island, and it was a perfect pristine day. And the next day I called the superintendent, resigned my job, and never went back. The best decision I ever made. Then we've lived, girls have both born here and grew up here. I lived in East Boothbay for that period of time. And then we lived in the harbor, rented an apartment. Then we bought a house on Barter's Island. We lived there for 7-8 years. Then we moved to the harbor on Sherman Street, just off the west. And then moved to Southport in 2001. And that's where we've been living ever since. So that's the deal. And I'm flattered to be asked to chat with you all. We've only been here 50 years, and some of the properties that were selected for this comparison are 150 years old. So I think Chip's here, he'll help me if you have questions about that are too in-depth. But I wanted to thank the Historical Society, Kathy, and the director, and Joe Ambrosino, who put together the whole computer program, because I couldn't do that in a million years. So anyway, I guess we'll start. So basically what happened is Kathy and I chatted. I said I'd be happy to do something that would maybe help benefit this. I don't know whether it will or not, but I did a thing in Southport several years ago where the director there picked a bunch of properties around Southport and asked if I would photograph those locations from the same perspective as the original photograph. I didn't have to talk about that. All I had to do was make a photograph. And I've made photographs here doing this, but the difference is I have to talk a little bit about the old original. So Kathy was kind enough to collect a lot of information about the properties and share that information, which I have here, some of which I will read because I wasn't around 150 years ago, and well, sometimes I feel like I've been around. So anyway, yeah, push the up arrow.
Yeah, or down arrow. Sorry.
Okay. I push the up arrow. Oh, so this was the old Central Maine Power Building in Boothbay Harbor. Now, a funny thing happened when I went to make this photograph. I never remembered a structure like that here in the harbor, but on the literature that I read, it said originally located at 57 Townsend Avenue. So ADHD and dyslexic that I am, I assumed that that was the right information. So I proceeded to 57 Townsend Avenue, which doesn't exist. it goes from Grover's, which I think is 43, then there's 53, which is an art gallery. The next building was Lewis and Pottle, was a funeral home, I think, Simmons, maybe. And then there's a redone building by the golf course guy. And I kept driving by. It's not here. I walked down the street. I made a photograph of that refurbished house and thought, this can't be where this place was. Well, it turns out where this was on the corner where the popcorn business is, which was previously Bob's Photo, for those of you who've been here for a while. And I said to my wife today, it just occurred to me, back in the day, we used to be able to go in there and pay our power bill and our phone bills and stuff. And I wondered if that might have been a holdover from the original Central Maine Power Building. I'm not really sure. But anyway, it's certainly not there anymore. This is what it looks like now. And you're going to see that my photographs are not particularly creative. It's just a documentation of the place. But when you think about building that was there and what's here now, I mean, it must have gone from this alleyway down. But I just don't know how it fit there because of the Maddox building is right there, right? That's an old building. So anyway, and then I thought I might read a little something here. Let's see. Luther Maddox, who turns out to be quite a significant individual in the region, wrote that in his autobiography that he considers electric lights the greatest benefit he brought to the region, which he loved. In 1895, he built a sardine factory on the waterfront opposite his home East Side. And for light and power, he set up a steam plant to generate electricity with John Old and Change as the engineer. It was obvious at once that he had electricity to spare and conceived the idea of supplying current to the community. In his autobiography, he complains that available local capital had gone into a gas plant, making it necessary for him to seek financial help outside the region. He interested two capitalists, an E.W. Gross of Auburn and later Frank Redland of Boston. It appears that his agreement with Mr. Gross gave the firm capitalized at $25,000 the name of E.W. Gross Company. Houses and businesses placed both for electricity at once, and soon wires were extended to East Boothbay, West Harbor, Southport, and Bayville. So, I mean, that's pretty much on this list. I have another little bit here. The Boothbay Harbor's 1896 warrant contains the first article calling for electric streetlights. It was turned down each year until 1901, when $1,000 was appropriated to change from kerosene to electricity. So that's that. Did you have something, Kathy, about this one? No. Okay. So okay, I'm gonna get that. So let's go to the next guy here. And if I'm too long-winded on any, you guys, okay, because I know there's people have to go home and have their dinner. This was an interesting one. Elliot Barlow, who some of you probably may have known, whose property. Well, let's just take a quick peek at this first. It was he had a pumping fill-up gas station on the property. This was in the location of Hannaford, where the grocery store is now. Then it was First National, I think it was called. And the next picture that I have, which is, I figured everybody knows what Hannaford looks like, but you'll be able to see the extent of the property. But he in the literature, it was his idea to sort of try to compete with the great big hotels that were throughout the region by having these little individual cottages. If you were facing Hannaford with your back to the the street, the highway, or whatever, Townsend Avenue, or Wiscasset, whatever they call it. To the right of the building, there's a road that goes up the hill, a dirt road that goes up the hill. And when I first was here, I did some work up in there. There were remnants of the old cottages, but they were pretty much all gone. So this next picture, this is an aerial that I made, I don't know, probably 15 years ago, I'm guessing. But I thought it was interesting because it would allow you to see all of the land that is, all of this land back in here was the Barlow Farm, and Hannaford, if you can see it, is over there by the crossroad. But his, let me just sneak over here a bit. His filling station and such was down in here, and then the cottages were back in this area here. But one of the things that I noticed, and Chip, you can probably verify this to a degree, is that many years ago, from what I can tell, this area was cut off clear. I mean, there were no trees at all. And so everything that's grown in around here that you see, it delineates his property to some extent, but it's a lot of it is also grown in, like these trees in here probably didn't exist at the time. And then I wanted to read you, excuse me, kind of a funny little thing that if I can find it here. He had a, Kathy and I were laughing about this. He had a, called it the Mootel. He had raised Hereford cattle, but before that he had chickens, he had grown mink, and I can't remember, there was something else, but eventually he harvested a lot of hay on the property to sell. But he decided that the chickens and the mink weren't making it enough, so that he converted it to pasture and got these Hereford beef cows, so that he could feed them with the hay that he had, or and maybe make some money a little better off. And I photographed with him, oh jeepers, now probably 30 years ago anyway. And he was a character. He was really an interesting guy. I want to find this. Oh, okay, here it is. In talking about his property, I think this was an article that was written by, there was a guy that wrote for the paper called Happy Hollow Henderson. It was, some of them may remember, but he lived in there was an old fallen down house out on 27 where Edgecombe Boat Works is now. And he was a bird, but he did a lot of interesting writing, and he wrote this story about what did I do?
You didn't do anything.
Oh, okay. He wrote a story about this what he called the Mootel, and let me just see if I can. It talks about an incident that happened on the farm, and it reads, this of course is one of the humorous incidents, referring to Elliot, and there was a whole mess of stuff that he did that was kind of interesting. But here, an incident that wasn't funny at all. There was a day that Elliot was turning a new bunch of steers into the feedlot. One of them, a 1,000-pounder, was reluctant to go through the coral gate, and corral gate, coral. And Elliot slammed the gates too soon and accidentally banged the stubborn steer on his stubborn rear. That did it. The steer lashed out with both feet, just like a stallion, and kicked the 300-pound gate right into Elliot's face. He almost lost the sight of one eye. They say a steer can't kick this way, but Elliot knows better. Then there was a day that a cow moose wandered into the pasture, walked right up to the brood cows, and presto, the moose put all 20 of the brood cows and even the cowardly bull right through a 4-foot strand barbed wire fence. And they didn't stop running till they got to the common in Boothbay Center. On the other hand, they tolerated deer amongst them without battling. But when they see a moose on the loose, they vamoose. This is Henderson writing. So he was quite a colorful writer. So anyway, but this also gives you a little perspective about the region too, and there are a lot of things that have changed even since that photograph was made. If you were to look at it really closely. And this was, I used to fly out of Wiscasset in a little 172 Cessna with a pilot over there. Did a lot of area work that way. Now it's being done by drones and I don't do that. So every now and then I get a call though. This this building actually is very much same. It's the main trading post, but now or that's what I knew it as, the main trading post, which is now Taylor's, Calypso, and but at the time, let's see, it was called Sherman's Livery, you can see, I guess, and then John Doerr bought it, and he called it, it became the main trading post. The Charles E. Sherman built this livery stable in 1908 at the end of Harris's War. And then there was something I wanted to, but it was there were carriages and horses and sleighs, all kept there. It said in 1915 the stable listed 2 Ford touring cars, 1 truck, 30 carriages and sleighs, 20 horses for driving, saddle, or work, and advertised in the advertisements was safe, livery, and boarding, upward parties especially. And when Sherman died in 1936, the building was sold to John Doerr, and he made it the main trading post, which is how I knew it in the first place. And then one brewer had it. He sold furniture and stuff out of there. And then I think Jack Kimball had it for a little bit. And then the Taylor family bought it. And they have the restaurant there and their shops sprinkled around inside. I wanted to see if there was anything else that I thought was interesting. I guess that's about.
What is that photograph from? You know,
When, what year?
what year?
That I'm,
Say
well,
1910s.
the
1910s.
yeah, it says that Sherman was built in 1908, but I don't know if that's the photograph. If that's when it was, but it was interesting to in conjunction with this picture. There was, as I was reading, the streets were all dirt, and in the summer they were dry and dusty. In the spring they get muddy with ruts, and in the fall those ruts would freeze, and you couldn't drive down the streets or anything until the snow came, and then they bring out the sleighs and the horses and stuff. And then I did read an article about how difficult it was to accept the idea of paving the roads. And paving the roads was a really big deal because it allowed for more vehicle traffic, and there were some real problem conflicts within the community because the people who owned the steamship line were used to bringing people down here by boat to stay for the summer. Well, then somebody wanted to put in bus line from Wiscasset to down here, and then the boat people were going crazy because they knew that would be the end of their business, which ultimately I guess you have to say it was, because everybody that once came by boat started coming by car. So anyway, so that's this guy. Oh, that's my picture for today. I mean, it's nothing terribly exciting about that photograph, but it's just basically the same thing. But and if you go inside, it's kind of neat because some of the old boards that were part of the livery stable and stuff, you can still see where animals and yes, sir. Yeah.
My understanding is, yeah, go with my wife.
right on the.
Ah, oh,
And there was a very large elevator that was lit from in the center of the building, that was lit from carriages and slaves up to the top floor.
wow,
For storage.
wow, wow,
I
yeah,
believe a lot of them applied for residents of Squirrel Island.
yep,
How, you know, store their equipment there.
Yep. yep. It, yeah, you know, this is an aside, and we had a really good friend here in the harbor named George Reed. Some of you may have known him. He was a carpenter and a shipbuilder way back. And he told, I remember him talking about the winters were so cold. Back when he was a kid, that they could drive a team of horses from Boothbay Harbor to Squirrel Island on the ice. And that's how serious shipbuilding. I mean, that happened. I mean, to freeze seawater like that, I mean, that's really cool. And I don't think he was pulling my leg either. I think he was telling you the truth. Really? No kidding. Oh, man. So this is, what is now called Granary Way. You can see the building in the back corner here. And it was a place where you could get grain and lumber. I'm not sure, maybe ice too, and I would have to guess. Trying to think of perspective, that would be coming looking from like Rocktide or something that way across the footbridge, but there was that swing span originally in the original footbridge so that it could open for boat traffic. But the pictures that I saw, there's a book out here with the cover photograph is a pretty big sailboat on a mooring, or not on a mooring, but tied up in front of that building, offloading, I think it was 5,000 board feet of southern yellow pine, which a lot of people use for flooring and stuff around here. There was let's see here. So my photograph isn't nearly as interesting. I think there was a fire that was it was H.W. Bishop Grain and Feed Store. It's down on the waterfront, Granary Way in Chowder House. This is what it looks like now. I mean, it's a different angle. I didn't include footbridge and stuff, but you can still see the characteristics of the building. And now it's sort of a social gathering place for weddings, or there's a little bar under the canopies and stuff. But the picture that I saw, excuse me, on this book cover, all along this portion of the waterfront where the parking lot stuff is, was piers, wooden piers, and there was a great big sailboat tied up alongside, which it had unloaded something. I'm not exactly sure what. It might have been that loaded lumber. Pardon. Is that, does she want to pass stuff now, or is that maybe after? Do you want to pass anything now, or? Okay. So this is this next one.
But I would add H.W. Bishop turned into Harold W. Bishop and Trump.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
the same individual, and he was dabbling in a lot of politics in town, and statewide as well.
Yeah, I did make note of that somewhere, but he did a lot of stuff around here. Anyway, it's in there somewhere, but this next one, this blows my mind. This is what this whole region had. That's where the post office is now. It was called let's see, it was called by different names. Hotel Fullerton, I think, was the name that it finally ended up being called. It was originally, let's see here, blacksmith John Weymouth moved to Boothbay from Vassalboro in 1827 and eventually expanded into shipbuilding in the 1850s. He also diversified in another direction in 1848, building the Weymouth House, which must have been a precedent in the heart of the harbor, on the site of the present post office. He made room for his hotel complex by moving the old McCobb buildings off the site up to the east side of Adams Pond. I mean, they used to move buildings around here like we go to a parking lot on the other side of the harbor. It's unbelievable. And the buildings that were there ended up being Wagstaff and L. Sherman. L. Sherman's old, where Barry Sherman is now, there was his dad had the upholstering business in there, but those buildings were apparently in that location. And I wanted to point out here, there was something else that was kind of cool. Building was hotel bulletin at the time of this was a 1929 photo. And then a family named McDougal owned the hotel for 22 years. And then this was the part that I thought was kind of neat. It was named for the Fullertons, a prominent early family. According to the brochure, room rates were $4.50 to $6 for a single room and $9 to $10 for doubles. And in 1946, the building was offered for sale for $35,000. And then I think in the 60s, it's when it got taken down. Because I remember Merritt Grover telling me he was up there vandalizing something. Okay, I think that's, then my picture. This is gonna blow you away. This is it. That's what we got now. You can't get in there now. Well, that means Boothbay people got mail day, huh? That's gotta be a madhouse, I would think, but I don't know what can become of that. Those poor people in the book. Okay, let's see now.
I have
and-
this to show off. Well, I'll show these.
Oh, yeah, please.
Okay, so what I have here is an old menu from Hotel Weymouth and also from Hotel Fullerton. So, wow. And here's a Hotel Fullerton brochure.
Thank you, Kathy.
And, this, I mean, you can recognize this now, I'm sure. It's just the same. I'll read you what in Green's history it says about Charles Moore. Just before the Civil War, the present Register building, the Boothbay Register, which had been built for a wood shop by John W. Weymouth, northerly from the express office, was moved to the present site of the Lewis block by Captain Benjamin Lewis and by him leased to, good one, Eliphalet. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Eliphalet. Accent on the wrong syllable. Or who traded in it until his decease in 1871. R.G. Hodgson followed in his store the same year, where he continued to 1884, when Lewis block was completed. Now, the Lewis block, is that the block that this lives on? Is that what that's called, the Lewis block? Anybody? I don't know. Yeah. And then when Moore bought it, it was clothing and food, shoes, and furnishing goods. And this is my take on. It's literally almost identical. Yeah,
Several generations of ownership still selling the same item.
yeah, yeah.
This is Charles Marr. What he looks like, and this is the pad and paper shirt. It's a keychain in the shape of a shirt.
Over and say,
Oh, we just never know what to find around here.
no, yeah. Anything on the floor. Alright, the next property is the old Spruce Point Chapel. Which got moved, boy, see my notes here. It's an interesting thing, and in the literature that I read, it talked about there were a lot of, I don't know about a lot, but there were chapels in the area. I guess there weren't such great, huge, big churches everywhere. There were small places sort of in neighborhoods. And this was one that was out, it's not about across from where you go into your house, isn't it? Pretty close. Well, before factory closed. Yeah, yeah. Where the Magazine moved that. Yeah, the can't remember, I think I had it here when it was moved, but it must have been moved in the 80s, maybe, or 90s.
I personally recall in the 70s, I couldn't tell you exactly what year, but I remember as a kid going in, helping decorate for a wedding that was to be held there. And I recall there was a food pantry in the basement.
I don't have it written. I guess it was, well, it's up at the Railway Village now. But and here's an interesting comment about it. It talks about how people would come from a little distance or walk or bicycle or whatever to the church. And it says, however, as the car became more prevalent, public buildings in the little villages dropped away. The car, a rarity in the 1910s, there were 8 in Boothbay in 1914. But they were becoming more common in the mid 1930s. And I guess as a result, the places of worship maybe were able to become larger and people could travel through them rather than go to their little neighborhood. And when I made the photograph at the Railway Village, I couldn't get a really great perspective because the trees have grown around the building. But it's a beautiful little building. It really is very charming. Inside's all intact. They're taking really good care of it as for tenants to do. Do you have anything from that?
I do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you credit for this. I found this in our archives.
Oh,
You took this picture,
I did.
and it is. I didn't tell you I was going to show it, did I?
Oh,
So this is it being moved to the railway.
says it was moved to the Railway Village in '93.
Yeah.
93.
I haven't seen that one. Must be in one of those boxes under the bed, the negatives that I have there. I think that's it for that one. And the log there was, it's like a totem, I think. It's a hand carved, beautiful piece of carving. But when you go in the doorway, there's a restraint that doesn't allow you to go inside, so they can observe the inside of it. But it's really, and I do know that it has been used, I think, for weddings and stuff. Let's see what we got next. Oh, this is the little river story. Yeah. The little river was at one time called, well, let's say it was seen prior to the Depression as an opportunity to, it was gonna be developed by some fellow from Pennsylvania who was dividing what he named Boothbay Shores into small parcels, 8-acre parcels for little places to be all around. There were trails and paths and stuff all through the area. And this water toboggan, you're gonna laugh because I thought, I couldn't figure out where it was. But when you go to Little River, you know that you drive around the King Phillips Trail there that goes down in the water, where there's a dammed up area. That dammed up area is called Glen Cove, I think. And this toboggan and the little building were on the hillside opposite the dam, and it was a slide. But as the economy got bad, and eventually there was a crash, the depression, the whole project ended. And it's kind of ironic, because the guy's headquarters was Treasure Island, where I came to live in Maine. And it's with a beautiful big log cabin. And inside there, they had a big map of what the development was going to look like. It was really quite extensive. But old Mitch, trying to figure out where this was, made a photograph. It's totally not where the toboggan is. This is, I thought it was over on that hillside over there, but when I read the literature, it explained that it was on the eastern shore of Glen Cove, which, you know, had I realized that, it's just a hillside of woods now. There isn't any, there might be a house or two over there, but I thought it was a pretty picture. So this is not what it appears to be.
Was the water toboggan and entertainment? Was it within an amusement?
Yeah, I think it was meant to be a place for people who were investing in this development to go and play and ride their toboggans or whatever they were
Mr.
gonna
Jackson
do.
had a vision of not only the water toboggan, but he had a tower as well, which is some 50 feet tall. He had a dam, which he wanted to create a saltwater swimming pool. And he had a restaurant and wanted to have a hotel before things went south financially for him in about 1929. Sorry.
No, please, yeah.
The properties that Mr. Jackson did all this bought formerly belonged to Benjamin Reed, Captain Benjamin Reed, who bought a lot of property at the river. He was quite the property owner. And he was also a shipbuilder and built a lot of schooners and barks and worked in the Boothbay area.
It wasn't Reed Shipyard at one time. I think, wasn't that name? Shipyard Reed over on the east side. Maybe.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. I know he worked with Caleb Hodgson and the originals. And this is a picture, a great picture, but it's a picture of Benjamin Reed House out, and you can see it there with this light. But there's a very large white house here in the background that belonged to Benjamin Reed in 1548.
Where is the river?
If you go out to East Boothbay, like you're going to Ocean Point, about halfway down the peninsula, there's a left-hand turn. It's the only way. There is no real landmark. You know where there's a church on the left. It's real colorful, painted purple. Just after that, there's a left-hand turn. It goes down. Yeah, and it took a terrible beating down there in these storms last winter. It totally wiped out the road on the Amherst Riverside, just like it did at Ocean Point. It got in under the blacktop and heaved up big chunks of. But it's really pretty down there. It's really a nice. A quick funny story, and I don't. If I'm taking too much time here, but when I lived there, I had never eaten a lobster. I'd never seen a lobster, let alone eaten it. And Phyllis had a kind of a weirdness about what she thought was funny and what she did. But she had guests, and she asked me if I would go. I think it was John Alley, who was a lobsterman up at the head of Little River, who sold lobster privately, retail to people. And she said, I want you to go get me, I don't remember what it was, 3 or 4 pound-and-a-half lobster. So I walked down there, didn't know Mr. Alley at all. I went in, introduced myself, said I went on this, I was coming for Phyllis to get lobster. And he said, okay, fine. He got lobster and put him in a paper bag. Well, on the way back, walking back from picking up the lobster, the bag let go. And the lobsters, which I had never seen before, were flopping and jumping and everything all over the ground. And I reached down to pick one up, and you know how they're right away, their tails start to flap. I flung it up in the air, and it hung up in a pine tree. I got a long stick and I was trying to bat it out of the tree, and some guy came out of his house. I said, God, I think he was thought I was breaking it. I got the lobsters all back in what was left of the bag and took them down to Phyllis, totally embarrassed. And she put them out in the sink, getting ready to prepare them. She said, Mitch, why are these all dirty? What? Pine needles on them and dirt and rock. I said, oh man, Phyllis, you knew what you were doing. I know she was doing it intentionally. This is this building, which is really cool, I think, but it became the American Legion Hall on the east side. And then Pearson Hartung Lumber Yard, and it is now Boothbay Harbor Inn, although this was up on the street. This wasn't down on the water. And it was, I think it was like clothing and stuff. I'm not positive about that. Merrill Frederick Dunton, known as Fred. I don't have too much information, but well, it says here, this is Barbara Rumsey, a dear friend of mine, wrote, the post-water system east side through was situated on Atlantic Avenue in front of Dunton's store and lumber yard, and is now the site of Boothbay Harbor Inn. When Pearson Hartung ceased to exist not long ago, cast iron, there was a trough. There was some kind of a trough that was around for watering horses and stuff, I think. But when I my first year here, I was living in an unheated apartment above a garage on Treasure Island. And I was out on the rocks one day doing some odds and ends for Phyllis. I can't remember what it was. And a man in a skiff with slickers on and lobster traps hanging off the edge of the boat came up by the shore, and he said, who are you? I've never seen you before. And I didn't know anybody anyway. And I said, well, I told him who I was and that I was originally from Pennsylvania and stuff. And he said, my wife's from Pennsylvania. She lives in a place you never heard of. And I thought, well, that's possible, but it's a big state. Punxsutawney, he said. And I said, not only do I know where that is, but we used to play them in sports. We are football, basketball, baseball, wrestling people, and we became instant friends. That was just all he needed. And he was not an Indian. Cooney Dodd was the guy's name, Winfield Dodd. And nicest to me was that people that I knew that worked in the shipyard said he could be kind of contrary sometimes. But in the fall and winter of that year, I was living there by myself. I didn't know anybody. And one day I was out on the rocks again, and he came by and he said, what are you doing on Saturday night? Well, I wasn't doing anything on Saturday night. He said, there's a gang of us that go to the American Legion and play bid whist. And why don't you come along? I said, I don't even know what that is. And he said, well, I'll teach you how to play. And that was my introduction to a lot of the really wonderful people in this region. Tony Dodge, or I call him Mr. Dodge, he didn't like Tony particularly, but there was Lucille Michon, who worked at the post office. Arnie Brewer was the postmaster. Bessie Cooper. Oh gosh, I can't even remember everybody who was there, but Ding Trask was another guy that was there. Old lobsterman whose forearms were the size of a human thigh. I mean, he'd lobstered all his life. Wonderful man. The heck of it was, though, because I was new to the area, all of these people spoke with a very, very heavy Maine accent. And Ding, that was what is. I couldn't figure out Ding, why anybody would call himself Ding, but Ding, he was a sweet man. But I tell you, I couldn't understand the word he said. First time, second or third time, I guess I went there, and we were sitting around, and I was getting the hang of the game pretty good, and I'd been in it, and people would bring cookies and pie and stuff. We'd take a break and playing cards and have a little bite to eat and then go back to playing. And Dane was sitting across from me. We just finished a hand, and he said, "That's more than a 3 or what?" And I said, I tried to, and I sort of said, "Oh yeah, well yeah, good, thank you." And I said, and I leaned to Tony Dodge was sitting next to me. I said, and he and when Mr. Dodge had a substantial accent too, I said, I can't understand the word he said. And he said, "Dang, put your teeth in." So he reached in his pocket, he pulled out pictures and pocket in his mouth. He said, "Welcome to Boothbay Harbor." And I wasn't right for a week after that. So this is what it looks like now. Obviously, Boothbay Harbor Inn at one time, that physical structure was a lumberyard. It was Pearson Hartung lumber, and then it got converted. I forget who the original people were. I can't remember. There was an outfit, a bus tour outfit from Massachusetts. They used to bring bus tours there, and now it's, I think, part of the Lafayette, who owns Fisherman's and Tugboat and all like that. So it doesn't look much like Dunton's anymore. Now the Catholic Church. I don't know what I did with all those information. Oh, it was interesting. The history of this was really interesting. In the early years, there weren't many Catholics around, so they didn't have a need for a Catholic church. But when it was built, it became part of a bigger, like Whitefield, and a larger area of churches that would come here and celebrate. But that was prior to when there was a steeple on it. This was right after. Let's see if I can read this. Sometime around 1910, the priests from North Whitefield began to celebrate Holy Mass in a variety of halls in Boothbay Region, Catholics from away. When visiting Catholic, people from other parts of the country came and visited. And when Father McCabe was named pastor in North Whitefield, the Boothbay Region was made a mission of St. Denis Parish and served by him. The need for a Catholic presence in Boothbay Harbor became apparent, and in November of 1916, the foundation of the church, Our Lady Queen of Peace, was laid. The new church was ready for services in 1917. The belfry and steeple were added in 1924. The present church, Our Lady Queen of Peace, has a seating capacity of 600. It was dedicated by the Bishop of Portland. This church was built to accommodate the summer visitors, and Father McCabe continued to serve this mission for the Mother Church of North Whitefield. But eventually that broke out, and they broke out from that, and it became, but now maybe the summer population is significant enough to support the church. But and then this is my picture of that now. Where was I headed with that? now the population is dwindling again, and they built this downstairs sort of smaller chapel. Yeah, thanks. For fewer people, where fewer people can join together on, because I think the parish itself right now is not great. And the fellow that, yesterday, I just went to a funeral for Mrs. Thompson there, and the man who was the priest was from Africa and has 3 parishes that he manages. Because there are so few people, they can't be dedicated to, one single parish and not. They just don't have the coverage, so he was handling it. He did a great job with, this is for Mrs. Thompson, but this was made from, this photograph. I think I was at Brown's on the pier, the docks down at Brown Brook, and I love the fog. I mean, I'll photograph in the fog until the cows come home. I don't know that I could do much business that way, but I just thought that was kind of a neat juxtaposition, the boats and the juxtaposition. That's not a word I use very often. Anyway, I think that's it. Thanks. Is that it? Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for having me. You guys have other things that you want to